Welcome back to Hoops HD, everybody. A very special podcast tonight. We're recording this on the evening
Woohoo.
of November 5th. We're on the third day of the college basketball season. It's been one of the most exciting nights so far in the last 7 hours. Uh, I'm your host, Chad Sherwood. First of all, we got David Griggs with me. We got Zach Singer and Rocco Miller from Bracketeer.org as well. And we're going to talk a little something different tonight, a little some scheduling stuff, and specifically, actually, we had planned to do this before the season even started, and it kind of really worked out well. What Boise State did Monday night with a little bit
Or
of loss
didn't
to
do.
a team by the name of Hawaii Pacific, not Hawaii, Hawaii Pacific.
Not Hawaii
Uh,
Atlantic.
Yeah.
and not Pacific either,
And not
which would have been
Pacific.
bad itself. Might have been worse. I don't know.
Yes, losing to Pacific would have been worse for Boise's metrics.
No
Uh,
doubt.
Yeah,
uh,
but not for their resume. Holy cow.
yeah, but we wanted to kind of talk about what's going on with this and why why everyone who's trying to watch games, this week is seeing such wonderful teams as Mississippi University for women, Belmont Abbey, Life Pacific, Pacific Lutheran, Lynchburg, Farmingdale State, who gave Stony Brook a test. Midway University was up double digits on Morehead State on the
Good
opening
Lord.
night. uh, but but the only one that you won was Hawaii Pacific. But Greg, so you wanted to kind of address some of this stuff too. So let me start off with you here. Because discuss kind of what we're going to be doing tonight.
It's kind of hard to know where to begin. All day I'm like, okay, how are we going to start the show and kick it off? In general, I understand the tendency or the instinct that a lot of teams have to want to sort of ease into their season. I'm just not a fan of it for all kinds of different reasons. You mentioned the D1 versus non-D1s, and I guess that's just sort of an extreme example of it. But Iowa, new coach, new exciting team. They open against Robert Morris, and the arena was empty. Everybody's like, "Well, where are all the people?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you expect?" I mean, they scheduled hot garbage. Nothing against Robert Morris or those players. I don't like dumping on programs, but you get some just non-compelling, atrocious games at the start of the season. And when you look at opening day in baseball and week one of the NFL, they start off with a bang. College football, at least now, had three top 10 matchups in the first week. College basketball starts off with a little pop gun pop. And it is so bad. I just think it's bad for the sport. And it drives me crazy when you see teams that are of regional opponents both complaining about how they can't get teams to play them. And there's a lot of truth to that, but it's not entirely true. Like you mentioned, uh, I'll just say that Northern Kentucky and Morehead State don't play each other. They've both expressed concerns about trying to build their schedule. Both on the same night opened against D1 or non-D1 teams rather than play each other. And that's one example out of 1,000. Rocco can speak to it much better than I do because he's a scheduling consultant. But I just, as much as I am, as glad as I am that college basketball is here, how are you guys enjoying the games tonight?
Yeah, Rocco, that's a great point. You, in addition to all the great bracketology work you do, and going to about 300 games per week,
Yeah.
um, you do work in the off season with a lot of schools to help them set up scheduling, and so why do we see such a lousy schedule the first week of the season? Actually, yes, there were a few showcase games, but very few.
I think there's a multitude of reasons. So I guess we'll just start with some of these conferences and locations of schools having a difficult time just getting home games in general. And so, if it's a little easier to get your neighbor down the street, like Fresno opening with Fresno Pacific, for example, why not do it, right? Just get a home game on the books, go to the maximum that your conference will allow. I think one of the extreme examples that's actually a really good league is Conference USA. Their commissioner recently expanded the non-Division One number from two to three. So every single team in the league is playing three non-division ones except for Delaware. And because Delaware regionally has the East Coast to pull from, so they can still get Patriot League opponents, they can get lower Division One opponents in the NEC, things of that nature. But everybody else in Conference USA, really tough to get to Ruston, Louisiana, Las Cruces, tons of examples, right? So it's interesting, and I think the other part of it is, let's say a coach last year played a good opener, lost it. He doesn't want to lose two openers in a row. I hear that all the time. Then you have the fact that almost 60 to 80% of these rosters are built overnight now in the springtime, and they want as much time to ramp up into, playing important games. You can play a non-division one, you can throw everybody out there, 14, 15 players even, mix and match rotations, and maybe that gives you one more data point that you want before you maybe go into a good game this weekend. And I think the last thing about that as well is coaches want wins, and they want to start the year off with a win. They want like something. If they're having a hard time getting their fans' attention or whatever, be like, oh wait, hey, look. Rice won their first basketball game by 80, and now all of a sudden maybe somebody will buy tickets next week that otherwise would never have paid attention to Rice if they lost their opener. So there's all these like marketing, coaches, job security, pride, and also the confidence of the players. Like you want those guys to be confident. It's a free way to get them confident early.
Yeah, go ahead, Griggs.
I was going to say Rocco is correct, I think, in assessing the mindset of a lot of coaches and maybe a lot of administrators. So what I'm about to say is not disagreeing with Rocco per se, because he's assessing the thought process. I'm
Yeah.
just disagreeing with the thought process. If you go back this past summer, we had Greg Campy on. Greg Campy has been a coach at Oakland for 42 years. So coaches that are worried about job security and worried about all this other stuff might want to look at somebody that's been doing it for 42 years and think, well, what does he do? Well, what is his philosophy? And his philosophy is not this.
And one thing, Zach, I think you were there, you were with us on the Greg Campy show,
I
correct?
was. I was very
Yeah,
excited.
I thought one of the things that he mentioned that I hadn't even thought about was especially in our new money era here. You can, as a mid-major school, go out, get paid to go play a game at a power conference school, make money that you can use that money to help pay to have that team, or you could spend $8,000 to $10,000 to buy a non D1 game at home, and you're not even going to make that much money in your ticket sales, your concessions. You're going to lose money on one of those games. Why aren't you going out and playing all those games on the road, especially if you're a mid-major school, just like
Yeah,
Campy is?
the one that's hardest for me to evaluate with what Rocco said is Middle Tennessee State. That's a program that's had a lot of success. They've made the NCAA tournament three times in the last 15 years, and under the current coach Nicholas, I mean, that most of those were about 10 years ago, but they were a really good team. Under Nicholas McDivitt, they won 22 games a year ago. They won 26 games back in 2022. They haven't been able to get back to the NCAA tournament, but they've been a really good regional program. And the fact that they're playing three non-division one games is crazy to me
Yeah.
that they're playing three. But in their case, I'm wondering if, and Rocky, this is probably a little harder for MTSU, a team that's been strong in the recent past, but that's the one that really gets to me because like it's one thing if it's a school that's in the been in the dregs, and I get it. It's hard for them to get like early season any sort of home games. It's not hard. It shouldn't be hard for Middle Tennessee State. Like they've been good, but they haven't been that good. Like the thought that nobody really the Blue Raiders couldn't schedule two non-division one games, they needed three. It's upsetting, and I also think in their defense, the way the system is that everybody has realized the way that you game the net is at the high end. You want to either play teams in the top 50 or teams in the bottom 50. If you are a team between 150 and 300 in this sport, I mean, good luck with scheduling. It's really hard because it's not as much that schools are like afraid to play you if you're ranked like 275, but there's just so little in it for the high money schools, and at the same time, those schools are trying to get the attention of players era to what Chad said, get really really big NIL checks. But that's why I appreciate what Greg Campy said, which is look, Oakland's not got a $5 million roster, right? but they can have the best roster maybe in their league in terms of monetary support. And the way they do that is they'll go and they'll play at Michigan State. They'll go play a tournament in Montana. They'll put it together. And I respect that because as a viewer and as a fan of what his program is built, but it's just kind of depressing to see some of these schools that are stuck kind of in the middle that are just punting on it and just take the D3 games because we'll make more in concessions and we'll only have to pay this non D1 team like $8,500.
Yeah, so I'd say the Middle Tennessee example, and that's a great league, Conference USA, to look at because of the fact that they took, New Mexico State. They have Louisiana Tech still for one more year. I like those two examples specifically, but even like Sam Houston has a brutal time getting anybody to come there, even though they're in Texas. And there's other examples throughout the league in kind of more remote locations than Murfreesboro. Murfreesboro, it should
Right.
be easy to not have to play non D1s. But the Blue Raider approach is basically like, well, if everybody in our league's getting three, we're going to play three as well. Because again, they're kind of looking at some of those other factors of rest, recovery, confidence, which are important, especially going into league play. And if they view their peers in Conference USA as more rested and more confident, they're gonna be like, why are we wasting our time, playing these other games? On the flip side of that, um, everybody at the Conference USA level, even Liberty, who is the, by far projected champion going into this season, is trying their best to get a paycheck. But simply the powers that be that have the money to go buy them. Now we, got that one successful date for Middle Tennessee when they got bought by Houston. That will come after Christmas. They might have gotten one other one actually late in the process, but I know that if you're at that level and you can find any date in the calendar to get a check, you're going to say yes. And so, like San Jose State got lucky with Utah getting that on opening night, but I feel like that's an exception, not the norm in this era. The norm is, those big schools want to play the very, very bottom. They're aiming for 350 plus, which narrows it down to 15 teams. And if they can't get 350 plus, then they're doing 330 plus, then they're doing 310 plus. So a league like Conference USA, you're squeezed out pretty quick. And then you're like, okay, well, how do we get home games? Well, we can do these three non-division one games that helps us with rest, recovery, and confidence. And then, we'll do a few regional series. I know Middle Tennessee, the last game they scheduled was a home and home with UAB, which is great. That's stuff we want to see. But again, there's just very limited windows for excellent matchups like that, and it's unfortunate because they're basically looking at the world around them and trying to stay at the same pace.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
the
quickly,
one that
quick.
the one that gets not gets to me because and I picked Middle Tennessee Rocco because
It's a
like
good one.
I get it for like Sam Houston or Louisiana. Like Middle Tennessee, you may not know this. It's in the middle of Tennessee. Like there are lots of options
Yeah,
nearby, but it's hard to get
They're
them
right
to.
outside Nashville, Zach. It's
Yeah,
a great place to go.
it's not hard
I
to
love
get
it
to.
there
There's a million
personally.
D1 teams there, and this isn't a team that's like nearby but not far, but like High Point is playing three non D1 teams. Middle
yeah,
Tennessee is playing three non D1 teams. I don't know. Seems like we had a
yes,
solution here.
you're yes, and
Yeah.
you know, one of the things I wanted to say, well, first an observation, and again, not disagreeing with Rocco, but what was it you said? Confidence and like
Rest
recovery.
and
Rest, recovery,
rest
confidence.
recovery.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, this
okay,
is just I'm just regurgitating what I hear
yes,
on the phone. This is not my like recommendation. It's
Yeah,
no,
just
Mhm.
at
we
a
know
certain
Rocco
point
doesn't
I
want.
can't fight. I can't fight back anymore. I've tried.
right. I wanted to make that clear before. Again, you are regurgitating what you heard on the phone. I am going to make a few observations. I'm not going to get into details. I've been around some teams that have played that have played road bye games and been boat raced and then been around the guys afterward, and they're fine. Their confidence isn't crushed. They knew what it was. If anything, it's a little bit exciting going into a big arena, playing on television and
Right.
having that experience.
Totally.
It's kind of something to look forward to. So this idea that like Oakland's confidence is crushed and their season's over. I mean, these are not mental midgets that we're talking about. Like they're fine. And as far as rest and recovery, my God, over Christmas when there's no class and there's no restrictions on practice, they're going to be practicing 8 hours a day. They can rest and recover fine.
Yeah,
Like,
Yeah, and
that's ridiculous.
and we're in an era where every game except for one earlier tonight that was tragic for all of us involving
Yes.
Mississippi Valley
Yes.
State University. Every game's on TV. And
Yeah.
with the way that the cable bundle's moving, like in a way fewer than ever are on TV. Most of them are on streaming, like an overwhelming percentage. But they're all on there. So your game's gonna be televised anyway. Why not go play at Ann Arbor, which is Middle Tennessee State is doing that. Like, why not get a once in a lifetime experience, playing at a big school? I know it's hard. Look, Kansas has only got two or three bye games, right? But I mean, ask TCU, right? Like, there are really big arenas compared to what some of these, in terms of environments, what some of these, low majors get. And I just think there's more in it for them. And also, it's like Greg Campe alluded to this. Like, nobody's getting. I'm just picking a random school. You're not getting fired as the head coach of Western Illinois if you go to Kansas State and get killed. Okay?
Right.
You might lose to Milliken. Like that's where you'll be in trouble. So for me, I view it as a free hit, but it is also harder for these schools. You do want home games. Uh, I just wish that obviously this wasn't the situation. I know Rocco wishes it wasn't as well, and I just think
Yeah.
I think it's getting better. I think
Is
that
it?
especially the younger, well, I'm hopeful that, and I say that before next year when we go to 32 games.
Yeah.
Like
I'm
that's
hopeful that is exciting, the 32 thing, but we'll get into that.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
because you would think that like Conference USA isn't going to go to five non-D1 games, but
And
I mean, we don't know. That's my one
We-
concern with it is that
Yeah.
does that now raise the level of the school that's going to add a like the fact that UMass is playing a non-D1 game is weird to me, playing UMass Boston, but like are you going to start they're not in the A10 anymore. Are you going to start to see every A10 team now tax on a non-D1 game? Like I don't want
Yeah.
teams doing this, but I also fear that now if we have 32 games, instead of this being something Conference USA and like the SoCon and the SWAC do, are you going to start to see the Missouri Valley Conference doing it? And that's the last thing I want. So that's a fear I have.
and you
Eh,
just mentioned three leagues, Chad, four leagues, or Zach, sorry. Zach just mentioned four leagues. Chad did not mention three. Zach mentioned four, all of whom could could create some really exciting out of conference matchups and opportunities instead of playing non D1s, which a lot of them are doing. And I want to get back to something that I think Rocco mentioned about wanting to play teams outside the top 350. And they essentially I think that we're almost for decades, literally, we were told by the selection committee that the net rankings and the RPI before that were basically just a sorting tool. And I, for the longest time, believed them. And I think for a lot of the time it was. But I'm starting to see that the net and the WAB in particular are being treated less and less like sorting tools and more like power rankings. And schools are becoming enamored with that. And they're wanting to schedule those teams to inflate their net in WABs by blowing, but well, you can just inflate your efficiency ratings by blowing somebody into the sun. And the committee, and we know some of them are watching. We listen. Why don't you start paying attention to that and factoring that in and looking at it instead of using it as a sorting tool? Like, don't become so enamored with these metrics. And one of the things they're supposed to be considering is strength of schedule or lack thereof. And it seems like in
Absolutely.
recent years they haven't been.
Yeah, and there well because
Absolutely.
and Rocco, you can clarify this for me. There's because the way the system is, there's no penalty for the non-D1 games. I mean, the easy first of all,
Right.
and David alluded to it, like
it's on
my
the team. It is on the team sheet technically, but it's not affecting
Yeah.
the ratings. Let's just be
right,
clear.
and
So there's a penalty of some sort.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's ridiculous.
my issue with it is first of all, they say like, I mean, I would like the committee to just admit it's a sorting tool. Like they do the S curve to it. Like they like it's really obvious and everybody knows it. And nobody's necessarily upset with that. We're more upset that they act like it isn't. So let's just be honest, it is. I mean, I
Yeah.
kind of wish it wasn't, but it is. So like, can we at least, if they can't acknowledge that, it's gonna be hard to fix a lot of this. And the other thing is the easiest solution is there's talk about, tweaking the weights to with the net to maybe make this easier. The easiest put a negative weight in for playing an on D1 team. I mean, that's
I
it.
mean,
Or
That'll fix it.
or for
yeah,
playing
I
a
mean,
crappy D1 team.
yeah, I just think to them, if they did punish you for playing an on D1, that's just going to hurt the mid-major contender even more because almost every power
Yeah.
team's not playing an on D1, so they probably will. Anything to penalize the non-power, I think they're all for it, and I think that's part of maybe why I don't know what David Warlock was trying to tell me. It's not anything I didn't know or what I wasn't trying to say about the Hawaii Pacific upset. I mean, I
I
get it. If
we
we get to the very end and the committee decides to pull up the opening night loss to Hawaii Pacific by 1 point and make that the reason why Boise doesn't make it, they have the right to do that. I'm aware of that. It's just the chances of that are pretty slim. And I think
Yeah.
there's a million other categories to separate teams with. And by the end of the process that we've all been through countless times, there's so much data to make that decision pretty clear that I can't even imagine needing to look at the non D1 game unless you were trying to use it as a point to your argument. So every other game Boise State plays the rest of the year will be later in the season than that one. So that was part of my point. But I think in general, it's tough because the challenges within those types of teams specifically, they're the least likely to get bought. Like Liberty and UC Irvine were desperate to get bought. They were the top.
yes,
Oh
They
yeah,
were the
they had
top.
no shot. I
They
feel
had
for
no
them.
shot. I mean, literally, I talk to those teams all the time because they're
Yep.
good, and they made the calls every day for 7 months, and
yeah.
even though I think USC flirted with Irvine for a little bit, and of course never pulled the trigger. So, and nobody touched Liberty because they don't want to play that
NC
zone.
State did. NC State did. It
Oh,
just
NC
that's the one.
State did, yeah. So Will
Yes.
Okay.
Wade, we love you. We love
Yes.
Okay,
you. I forgot about
I
he got
got
that one
another
early.
one.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Will Wade, McNeese last year or the year before, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Rocco, but this is not hyperbole. They reached out to 300 institutions, is that and could not fill their schedule. And it was just like
That
I,
happened to New Mexico State this year as
having in New
well.
Mexico State. I don't know what High Point did, but you look at their schedule, and I would imagine High Point, I would think you can speak to this better than I can, that they wanted to schedule harder than what they were able to, but teams are avoiding them and instead scheduling non D1s and teams outside the top 300. Uh, this is one of the tweaks. Like one of the criteria for the selection committee that they look at is intent to schedule. And what that means is if you put together what appears to be a strong schedule and it lets you down a little bit, like you scheduled Miami or whoever, and they start off ranked in the top 15 and top 20 and just completely barf throughout the year. Well, you tried to schedule. We saw that you were making an effort, so we're not going to ding you so much, or we'll consider that. I would like to see that taken instead of intent to schedule. I want to change one word, attempt to schedule. And I remember seeing on Basketball Travelers a few years ago, I've made this example before, Stephen F. Austin, who is not as good now as they used to be,
Sure.
basically put ads on there that read, I'm paraphrasing, but they basically read, we will go anywhere in the country and play anyone for nothing. And they still couldn't fill their schedule out. I don't know how
Right.
you attempt to schedule more than that. And if
Yeah.
they're on the bubble, I think that deserves consideration. And well, how can the committee keep up with that? These are ADs and conference commissioners. They know who's trying to schedule who. They know who's being avoided. And if they don't know, they can call Rocco because he does know.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, and I think a recent example, Princeton came off that amazing year last summer, and they did the exact same thing that you just described, Mr. Griggs,
Yeah.
which is they basically kept saying we'll play whoever, and we don't even need a check. Now, of course,
Yeah.
if it was Duke, they would want some money, but they ended up doing it with St. Joe's. That game they played at St. Joe's last
Yeah.
year
Great game.
was for no money, and And so it still goes on. That part hasn't changed much. It's more like, the teams that have the money, why would they're looking at it as why would we take the risk? Plus, if that team doesn't end up being as good as we think they are, then it's only a quad three win, and that doesn't move the needle for us either. So I think the grand scheme of things is these charades are not going away. I think the grand scheme of it is within the tools themselves, and how the net is calculated and how the quad system is devised for home, road, and neutral. It's created a surplus of neutral court games for the teams that are just trying to optimize their quad results. And then it's also, turned into this game of we'll never play a quad three home game. We're either playing a quad one or two really good home game, or we're going to go to the very deep end of quad four. And that's the mentality literally everywhere.
Yeah,
There's now like full on companies preaching this to the decision makers at the Power Fives and even the mid major plus schools that have good budgets. High Point would be included in that. They have a good budget as well, which is why NJIT and Canisius are going to High Point this year. So
yeah.
it's not going away as long as the tools and the decisions with the committee are staying where they are, and they're actually just getting
Yeah.
even worse because we could get into Texas's case last year, which they did not have one.
Yeah.
so so
Okay.
anyway,
That's a whole other show, which we've done a
Yeah,
couple times already, but probably deserves
yeah.
another hour. But go
But
ahead,
if you look
Chris.
at UC
we're gonna
Irvine
bring them
last
up on every
year,
show.
High Point this year, UC Irvine won 31 games. I think they won 15 true road games. And I would argue that what they did was harder to do than anything that the first four teams did as
Yes.
far as where they won and how many they won. But all that aside, it is maddening and it is wrong to look at UC Irvine and or High Point this year or whoever, and nobody wants to play them, and then at the end of the year, those same schools are saying, "Well, the committee can't select them; they didn't play anybody." I mean, if that doesn't
It's
smell bad to you, then you have no sense of smell. And I want the committee. That's why I want it to be attempt to schedule. Well,
Yeah,
nobody wanted to play them, so they
it
must be
feels
good. We're selecting them.
it feels a lot like dirty politics where they kind
Yeah,
of know the
yes,
script before the thing even plays itself out.
yeah. It's
right.
like, well, they didn't play anybody. Well, yeah, they did. And okay, they didn't play anybody because nobody would play them. So we're selecting them.
Yeah, it's almost like you need the first four teams to. Hey, before we pick you, would you have scheduled these teams?
Yeah, yeah,
The answer is no, you're eliminated. Or like,
yeah,
I know this will never happen for a million reasons. I wish there was some sort of situation where like if you're a first four team as an at-large from a power conference, you have to schedule the best mid-major that's left out. You have to give them a home and home or something. I know that's not happening or possible, but I'm just trying to think of some sort of
There.
carrot because the only thing they've done so far is make all the mid-majors have to pay the house settlement. So like
Yeah.
they're not really
It's going the
helping at
opposite
all.
direction.
yeah,
I
Nothing's
mean,
getting closer. It's only getting more divisive.
there is
Exactly.
a stat on the team sheet, non-conference strength of schedule, but I don't.
yeah,
But the
They're like
committee says
ignoring it now.
the committee says you play in the SEC, so we don't mind that you played a bunch of garbage
yeah.
non-conference. If we could focus it on non-conference strength of schedule for a year or two with the committee members, it could solve this problem. And
It,
teams will say we can't do all these tier four teams. We can improve that non-conference strength of schedule by scheduling the top of tier three, and we'll still win the game.
yeah. We've been following this for many, many years, more than 20. Up until recently, I think they paid a lot of attention to that. The last 2 years and
Yeah.
last year in particular, they ignored it.
Well, I think in the ACC, for example, it's still a big deal because it was like 3 or 4 straight years that one team would get left at the altar because of horrible non-conference.
Yeah.
We had
And it was the
Clemson the one
stated
year.
reason. Yeah.
We had Wake Forest one year. We had Pittsburgh one year, and so
And then we had
it
Virginia
was
Tech
very
one year.
clear in that league. But like last year Vanderbilt, a team like we all liked Vanderbilt, and they scheduled soft because it was the first year for the coach, and they ended up getting a 330th something non-conference, and they're like, oh. Here's your 7-10 game, no problem.
Yeah, and there's if you look, I'll just pick the
In
SEC.
Irvine, we liked them too. They would have beaten Vanderbilt.
Yes. As an example, the
Like
SEC,
Drake
there
did.
are, and I'm pretty sure I'm close on this. I'm just kind of ballparking it. So 18 teams, if everybody's got 10 non-conference games, it's 324 possible schedule slots, which feels like a lot, but at the same time, that like that wouldn't even cover basically everybody else, and that's just one league. And of those 324, probably 260 are going to be, your challenge games, your high end, your players, everything like that. So really across the league, we're talking about maybe four spots for on each team's schedule to do the low major thing. That's only 72 spots to play an SEC team. There's more than 72 low and mid majors looking for games. So it's not only that they aren't willing to, but like even if they were, the math isn't there. So that's where it really is, like as Rocco alluded to, it's like it's an unwinnable fixed political game in a way. Like there's nothing if Stephen of Austin can go out and play Alabama, Iowa State, and UConn, they still, they're non-conference. They're not looking at non-conference schedule anymore. Like Chad alluded to, they just look at overall strength of schedule. And I think there's a lot to it because the SEC was an incredible league, but it can't be all or nothing. And that's kind of the way we look at it. I think it's being looked at and the way it's being scheduled. There's just no middle anymore. There's nothing. It's either you're getting an incredible, unfortunately, neutral site event with a big NIL bag, or you're playing Bethesda. Like there's no in between. And
And,
that's what's
and,
upsetting.
and Zach, even you look at the SWAC. I mean, the SWAC conference was
Oh,
notorious for the teams
yeah.
wouldn't even play home games until conference play. A school like Texas Southern had multiple years in a row where it would not play a single non-conference home game. They'd just go because they needed the money. I'm looking at
Yeah.
Texas Southern's schedule for this year. They've got two non-D1 home games against College of Biblical Studies, one of our favorite schools, and Houston
CBS.
Tillotson. But they also end up with Sam Houston and Samford both at home. Why? Because, and even some of the road games are games like at Texas State. They do have a few bye games in here against power conference teams as well, but they got an Abilene Christian home game as well. This is not what we used to see because the slots aren't available. I think that is a good point.
Yeah, and I just think
Well,
back to a couple of years ago, the way this was, where it was a realization along with the greater social realization in the country. Like it's wild that it came out of that, but out of a lot of the Black Lives Matter discussion was suddenly the realization. I mean, it was way, way down on the list of importance, but it came up that was like, hey, so the SWAC and the MEAC basically can't schedule home games. That's kind of screwed up, right? Isn't it? And you had, to their eternal credit, the Pac-12 stepped up
Yeah.
and
Yes, they did.
they did an amazing deal where every
right.
Pac-12 school had to play a home and home with a SWAC school. And about a year and a half after that came to be, two things happened. One, they started losing the home games, which was amazing. To SWAC, SWAC teams were beating Pac-12 teams, and the Pac-12 imploded. And I will have you note, the Big 12 and the SEC and the Big 10 have not exactly rushed to take up the mantle of that. I said it when that series, when the conference is dissolved, when the conference dissolved, I said to you guys, I'm like, those conferences are looking at the Pac-12 and going, we are not doing that. What were you idiots doing that? We are not scheduling home and homes with Texas
But
Southern.
they're not even buying them anymore though, which
Yeah,
makes
Yeah.
it
they're
worse
just
though.
not only are they not home and homing them, which would be the decent thing to do, they're not even acknowledging them. And it's an example I use of like the one time ever where there was actually an equitable scheduling model set up with a power conference. Of course, it was the power conference that stunk, and of course they got their
Yeah.
butt kicked, and everyone else was like, "No, we ain't doing that." And it's sad. I wish I wish the Big East or the Big 12 or the Big 10 or the SEC or the ACC would do that. But it's because the SWAC and the MEAC is specifically have always been at the bottom of the totem pole. My beloved Northeast Conference as well, where there's like at least
Yeah.
the NEC schools can kind of get some home games. The SWAC and the MEAC schools just can't get them, and financially those institutions are under so much pressure. And they had this great thing that was given to him and it's been taken away and just nobody said anything. Everyone just go and that to me is like really disgusting's too strong of a word for it, but it is really messed up.
Unfortunate.
It's
Like,
really messed up that we saw a problem, we solved it, and then because the league imploded, everyone's like just acting like, well, this is fine. Screw Texas Southern. No, those are great, very important institutions with great basketball histories that can't get home games. It's they're almost blackballed. Terrible use of phrase, but you know what I mean. They just
yeah.
can't get home games.
Yeah.
And I just want to point out, like the examples were were sparse and there weren't many of them, but there were a few. There was enough of a case study. Wisconsin, when Bo Ryan was there, they would go either to Green Bay or to Milwaukee every year. Tony Bennett at Virginia would play on the road against regional opponents and in-state schools, and they didn't always win them. Roy Williams may have been the champion of it. If he liked you, he'd come to your place. They went to UAB. They were going to go to Monmouth when King Rice was there, but COVID prevented that from happening. Where else? They went to Penn. They were St. Louis, like Northern Iowa. They lost more than their share of those. Yet North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Virginia's programs did not implode. And I just want to be like, I understand that I get it to a point, but what are you afraid of?
Mhm.
Like, you know,
Now
like,
there are still a few teams that are doing this type of thing. Griggs, also give a shout out to Duke this year. They're going to Army
yes,
next week. I
Yeah,
mean,
really cool.
yeah. Well, yeah.
mhm,
Yeah, I
No,
think
and they've done it before.
mhm.
Did
Once.
North Carolina go to Davidson, like to Davidson? I think they did.
yeah, they
Carolina
went
was
to a
always
bunch
the
of
best.
them. They
I
Yeah,
went to
looked
a
at
bunch of them.
Carolina under Roy Williams. They were the best at it. They would
yeah.
play everybody
Well,
in California on their way out to Maui. They
mhm.
play Hawaii at the State Sheriff Center before playing in Maui. They deserve a lot of credit for it. And I do think some of the younger generation of coaches are like less paranoid, less scared of stuff. Well, they're less
Yeah,
scared about like playing the elite teams now. You're getting a lot more home and homes, and that's great. We got to kind of weed out this level of fear. I just pulled up. I mean, David, have you looked at Vermont's schedule this year? They won tonight to go 2-0. They beat Western New England barely on Monday, and they beat Plattsburgh State tonight. Have four home non-conference games. Yale, which is a good one. Merrimack,
yeah.
Siena, and Iona.
That's a good game, that Vermont Yale game.
Yeah, but and my point of
All
view is
four of those are
I
good.
wish that for 80 years UConn was in a league with like UNH and Vermont and Rhode Island and UMass. I wish we would rotate in with one of them on the road. I doubt we'd lose, but if we lost, the sun would come up tomorrow. Okay,
Yeah.
they'd be fine. And I don't think losing to a team like Vermont especially is going to really I mean, UConn lost to Colorado last year. That was worse than losing to Vermont would have been.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is Zach as a UConn guy. Remind us exactly how many in-state opponents UConn has left on their schedule after their win over New Haven.
Hold on, I'll pull it up. I
That
believe
it would be zero.
it would be zero. Yes.
Yes, it would
Yeah.
be zero.
No, I wish that in terms of the goodwill thing, it'd be nice if UConn could rotate a second
Yeah.
one in,
Mhm.
instead of just there's one spot and it's always the newest D1 team. UConn schedule is really hard, but they also love scheduling an opponent's first ever D1 game. They did it with Stonehill.
Yeah.
I believe they did with Merrimack. They did with Lemoyne last year. They did
Yeah,
it
they
with New
were.
Haven. We love opening night for some new D1 team. And there was actually like probably 500 like New Haven bust up the students and stuff. They were loud. Like they brought an atmosphere too. And yeah, it'd be cool if UConn could rotate in like Sacred Heart. I'm not gonna bring up Yale because I don't think James Jones and Dan Hurley get along great. But I mean, obviously that would be the best game to play. But in terms of just basically, you had to play, UMass Lowell, East Texas A&M for the second year in a row, by the way. You couldn't fit in Sacred Heart, but yeah, it is what it is, and it's unfortunate. And their schedule is an example. It's this incredible non-conference schedule, and also four really bad teams. Well, Columbia we don't know, but three really bad teams.
Yeah, and Roy Williams was fine. I think college basketball, in a lot of ways, is a fireworks show, metaphorically speaking. It's these big explosions that, in the moment that it's exploding, is this really big deal. But as soon as the explosion is over, it's kind of forgotten, and you're on to the next thing. I remember, like, no one remembers that Northern Iowa beat North Carolina. But they do remember that North Carolina went deep into the tournament, and I think to the Final Four that year. Louisville went to Western Kentucky and lost and was the number one overall seed that year. No one remember. I mean, it fades into the background, and that's a lot of words to say that you don't. Whatever the big programs are afraid of by going on the road and playing a game like that, you don't need to be afraid. North Carolina was just fine, and they didn't fire Roy Williams.
Yeah, and it's also worth remembering there's like 5,300 of these things a year of these games. Like it's gonna fade away.
Yeah.
It's gonna be it's gonna. I remember the other night. Oh yeah, how James Madison knocked off Michigan State in like their opening night last year. It
Yeah.
turned out that, or 2 years ago, that JMU team ended up being really good.
And to kind of circle back, yes, Boise State lost the opening game to Hawaii Pacific, but as Rocco said, they build up the rest of the resume the rest of the season, and they deserve to be in. And you have one little blemish on your record. It's just one little blemish on your record.
Yeah, but it
Yeah,
is
That
weird
one
that
may
it's
be a little more than a little
but
blemish,
But
but
it's not in the net though, and
yeah.
that's
it
if
doesn't
they're
show up in
used
any of this in any of the sorting tools at
and
and
they're
all.
it won't be any of the story
Yeah.
twos.
It won't be in the quad records either.
It does factor into a few of the other metrics also that are on the sheet. I know the KPI actually does
Just K,
factor in non D1s. I think this is the only one,
just just KPI. Yeah.
and our
yeah, and
JMG
well,
does also. But
yeah, it's
Yeah,
good
I
for
mean, I would
everybody.
say, oh, sorry, Zach, go ahead.
No, Rocky, you can take it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the other component in scheduling that's kind of the big elephant in the room that we haven't mentioned yet is a lot of the buy games or even strategic games, if you will, have an NIL component to it. And that has also impacted the behavior and the ultimate final result you see when you see a team's non-conference schedule released. And so, like, on the highest end, you see like Kansas State's going to Indiana and no return game. You look at the contract, there's $0 on it, but somewhere behind the scenes, Kansas State's certainly benefiting by going to Indiana without a return game. You see a lot of that in the neutral court games where you basically run it through a third party and both teams somehow get compensated, just know that they do. And it
They
factors
do.
into how they build, their future rosters, what they want to. And typically, most of the money that is generated from those types of alliances are going right back into their pool of money for players. And so now you're seeing a surplus of teams from the Mountain West all the way down to the NEC. That to me is 26 of the at least 26 of the 31 leagues where you have teams now that need those checks or they're going to figure out creative ways to get paid. And so there's teams like in the past that would get bought. Let's just use, I don't know, UT Martin, for example. UT Martin on an average year probably gets a guarantee game in the quantity of about 4 to 5 times a year. Well, maybe this year they've been told they need a certain money amount of money, and they've got to get 7 or 8 of those. Then you have it happen in the CAA. You could probably look at a team like Campbell and all the different places they're going this year. Then you have there's these examples are everywhere. Then you have teams like San Jose State who probably never needed to get bought ever, but Tim Miles is smart. He needs players too. And San Jose State gets a check to go to
Players
Utah.
need 10 miles. Sorry,
The
sorry.
players need Tim Miles. And so all of this is part of it. And that is also taking away dates from, maybe the SWACs and the MEACs. But I will say this, the SWACs and the MEACs are some of the sharpest schedulers there are in the country because they know what their value is. And so a lot of
Mhm.
them are hard to deal with because they'll say, we're either getting paid this or we're not returning your text or calls. And so it's created it's a competitive world for this money that's potentially out there, and it's kind of producing like some kind of crazy results because of that component as well.
And the other side of that is whether schools opted into house or not, all of them are paying for the house settlement in one way or another. These
One way or
leagues are,
another.
it's
Yep.
coming out of their NCAA distributions, which means the leagues are getting less money than they expected, and the schools are getting less money than they expected. So these low major schools, where the funding is so tight to begin with, now have a massive hole in their budget because they have to go pay for, a house settlement that's really, if we're honest, for like, the Power Four leagues. But the Southern Conference and the NEC have to pay for it too, which is ridiculous, but they
Yeah.
they have to. And so now these schools, which were desperate for money before, I mean, now you've taken a significant double-digit percentage out of their budgeting that they had planned for these years. So now it's even more cutthroat. Now there's even more of a drive, I think, for because of that, to play the non-D1 team at home because you pay them less, you open the gates, you could sell tickets, and you probably clear a lot more money. And it sucks for the viewing public, but I in that
It
regard, I
does.
get why they're doing it.
well,
Right. And I think that's
honestly,
also why.
Yeah, I was gonna say these tier four teams need to start demanding more money on these buy games. And they probably are.
Yeah,
The MEAC ones and some of the bottom
Yeah.
SWAC ones are really are sharp with it. I would say, yeah, Zach, like I think that's the thing is that it's created a that whole notion. If a coach goes onto a podcast now and says we called everybody in the country, well, we're at a point now where everybody calls everybody in the country
Right.
because the staffs are bigger. You can have up to 5 full-time assistants. And then, depending on the level of the program, you probably have even more support staff. And some of those guys at the bigger places are just this is all they're doing all day. So I'm hearing from them all the time, and I'll
Yeah.
talk to a guy that's younger with all the energy to do it, and he'll be like, "Oh yeah, in the last 3 days, I've reached out to all 364 other teams." And so this is not like a novelty anymore. This is like every stone is unturned for nearly all these programs unless they somehow have a technique of getting ahead of the schedule like a year in advance and filling a lot of those dates early.
Yeah, and Rocco, I want to ask you this because you would know with your background. It would behoove these leagues to, I mean, you could take the school names out of it, but like
Sure.
put a spreadsheet together for your members with, hey, here's how much we're getting from who, so that everybody knows what they're worth. Because at the very least, you would think that the entire Northeast Conference or SWAC would be able to get on the same page, kind of try and rig the market back your way, right?
Yep. Yep.
See what the going because to what Chad said is they all need to demand more money. Well, the only way they're going to be able to do that is if they know what everybody else is paying, and it's you're not going to get a national database of that, but you can at least get one out of your league. You would think at least all of the teams in the Big South would tell the league, here's what we're getting for each game, and you can call them quad one opponent on road if everyone's going to be that friggin' paranoid about giving away their info. But given that this is only something to benefit the league, I would think that it would be a good idea. Rocco, do you know of any leagues that are kind of sharing that info?
It's more about your budget level and your overall level of talent,
Okay.
more than your league because like the Big South's a good example. High Point is operating
yes.
like a
Yes.
mid-major plus operation. Now
Right.
Radford's got a big influx of cash. So High Point and Radford are wildly different than Charleston Southern and USC Upstate, but I would imagine Charleston Southern and USC Upstate would make a lot of sense for them to talk because they're kind of looked at similar. Maybe Presbyterian could go into that
Yeah.
bucket as well. And then there's a middle tier with your Longwoods and your Winthrops and UNC Asheville's, right? So it's just different based on your budget and your talent level. I would say on the flip side of your point, Zach, and going back to Griggs's example of Louisville winning at Western Kentucky back in those glory days when we saw a lot more of those matchups, I think now it's gotten to the point where if Louisville wanted to go to Western Kentucky or if SMU wanted to go to North Texas, right? The rest of the league would probably call them the next day and be like, "What the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
You're risking our league floor by playing those types of games," which is why California doesn't go to San Jose State anymore or Stanford, even though they used to play every year. And so now everybody's so focused on the numbers and the metrics and they're obsessed with it. And then you have these companies doing, presentations and Zoom calls that you're afraid to even do it, even if you want to, because you just don't want 17 phone calls from your super conference friends the next morning after you schedule that game.
Yeah, it's a great point. I see, if you're a fan of a Big East team, you've got to root for every Big East team to win every game because we got to
Yes,
boost those numbers. So when we play each other, and
Yeah, that was what killed them
correct.
last year.
That's what
yeah,
The whole
happens.
league was bad in the non-conference. I just pulled up and because Stanford and Cal are kind of their own examples or their own exceptions.
The
St
numbers matter, though. The numbers
they do.
matter.
Stanford's only road non-conference game is San Jose State.
Oh,
Now,
so
a
they still
lot.
have it. They still have
okay.
it. They'll get rid of that,
Yeah.
I think, in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Now we've
then
seen
we
this a
need
lot
Which
to.
with
sucks.
we've seen
Yeah.
this a lot with majors in the past, but with Stanford, they're in the situation where like they've got to travel a billion miles once they get into league play. So I kind of get it, but
Right.
it is kind of jarring to see because you start to see major schools go away from kind of the Duke coach game model where they're only home games. But this one is like a throwback
It
because
Yeah.
is.
they are not and I know Vic
But
Cronin
Kyle
spent all of
Smith
last
is
year complaining about
confident.
leaving
Yeah.
California. So I know UCLA is not leaving California
No way.
until they have to by by rule for the league.
But well,
Correct.
okay, Rocco, that is a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. It's something I hadn't thought about. And there is this hyper awareness now of the net and the WAB, or the WAB, and
Mhm.
like, okay, if we're not going to use those as sorting tools, and they're going to become more and more like power rankings that make the decisions for the committee rather than the committee evaluating how it sorts the information on a page, then we need to change those metrics, because you
Thank
shouldn't
you.
be penalized for going to SMU or going to North Texas and beating them. You should be rewarded for that. It shouldn't be this high risk, low reward deal.
And
It shouldn't be
honestly,
high risk, low reward to go play a team on at their place who's good at home. And it is. And if that's why schools are hesitant to do it, I get that. Then we need to change the rank. Then we need to change the rankings, or we need to change how the committee uses them.
I
Hello,
would
committee.
say
We know you're watching.
Well, I would say individually, it does make a lot of sense to go play that on the road because
Yes.
the quad system will support you in that. And you go to North Texas most years, that's right on the border of a quad one or quad two, where the program has been there. So there's a lot of reasons to do it, but I think the way the conference looks at it and the thing that kind of drags everybody down is, well, if we go and lose to an American conference team or lose to a A10 or that next cut of leagues, WCC, Mountain West, then we're elevating that league. So let's just not give them the opportunities. That's where they look at it as a risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
to the statement you just said, USC plays Boise State. Like,
In Maui,
yeah,
though, that was assigned to them by Maui, not by their own doing.
fair. But like, yes, the loss to, and I'm not gonna murder Boise State over it, but like,
I
They might
am.
have a good year. We don't know.
right, they might.
Yeah.
But also, like, yes, it's on the team sheet. But as we discussed, they just are hard coded into the net, and to a lesser degree, like Ken Palm. Like, I love that it's in KPI and the nitty gritty, which they should obviously be using number one, but they don't use those as much. So the sorting tool that
Yeah.
they use to do this, like 98% of it, that loss just isn't in there. And that's crazy to me that it just isn't in there. Like, you can talk about it's on a corner of the team sheet, but they're not looking at that. Okay,
No,
and by the time
no.
we get to the selection situation,
People will forget too,
nobody's
unless
remembering. We
And,
will have
and,
played
and,
4,000 games. So
yeah,
the fact that that loss isn't in the thing they used to pick the field is crazy to me. And if USC loses to a
which
team
is
that
true.
lost to Hawaii Pacific, USC, it's in a league that is terrified of the net, like Rocco just said. They don't want to do it. That's something that would kill USC and the Big Ten a little, and it's just not in there. And that's wild to me.
yeah, that Boise State loss is, if they lose to Boise State, it's not going to look as bad as a loss as it really is because
Yeah.
Boise State's net is going to be overinflated.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's my issue with it. Like, it
That's
has to
not,
be
it's
in
not going to be
there.
on the USC team sheet. I
Yeah.
promise you the Boise State loss is not going to be on the USC team
And I've
sheet.
defended the committee. We've known committee members, like
Yeah.
we get a lot of help from them. We've done our own mock committee, and I figure if we're smart enough to know that Boise State lost, but I'm starting to think, especially after last year, that in more cases than what it should have, and it certainly wasn't all of them, that they let what should be a sorting tool and not a power ranking make up their mind for them. And if
Okay.
we're going to do that, then we
Right.
we either need to change how that tool is used or change the tool itself to where you're not penalized for for playing quad two and quad three games.
Yeah, and it can't be, well, we don't know how to quantify it. Well, you've
Yeah,
quantified the other things. Like, it's
right.
we're picking numbers here.
Okay,
Like, pick a
here's
number.
Well, yeah,
yeah.
and I think
All
that's
these
like the
companies,
scariest.
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Griggs. Go
Well,
ahead.
okay, these companies you talk about, they do exist. They come and they give presentations. It's just, I guess coaching basketball and being an athletic director means you never took junior high math and you can't figure out a real simple concept. Here's how you game the net. Go on the road and play a weak team and blow them into the sun.
Yeah, I mean, I think the scary part for me is I've had the opportunity, and again, I thank the folks that have spent time with me. I had the opportunity yesterday to interview Keith Gill. He'll be the chairman this year. I spent time at 2 nights in a row with Martin Newton down at the SoCon event. That was
Yeah.
amazing. He's the vice chairman, and then
Yes.
obviously
Love these
I've
people, not calling them out individually, but yes, go,
no,
go.
no, and
Yeah.
and Stu Jackson, of course, and the Big Sky guy, Tom Wishroll. There's like really great people, and I have good relationships across the board there. And one of the things that scares me, and just like you guys, studying these committee responses over decades, this is one of the first periods of time, probably the first period of time, where I've literally heard the answers to some of these same questions
Yeah,
be metrics first. Whereas I've always been trained in the way I've always understood the process to
yeah.
be do all the work first, look at all the records, compare all the teams, and then use the metrics as a way to check your work, not as a way to lead into your work. And I think that's a majorly flawed approach.
And
It
my
it
theory on
is.
that, Rocco,
Yeah.
and I can't really like confirm this, but is that that job has gotten that these folks have has gotten so much harder, of course, and now you have to go raise like even more money than before. And it's fundraising for NIL, fundraising. I just don't think they have the time to invest in it. And I know they're working hard. I know they're assigned conferences. We know the nitty-gritty of this and the time that's supposed to be invested in it and has been invested in it. I
Yeah.
just they only have 24 hours in a day and they have full-time jobs and it's not like against even these people. I just don't think they have the time. And that's what I think the dead giveaway is when it's here's the 17 metrics. I think they're using the metrics as a stand-in for the fact that they just don't, they know they're assigned the West Coast Conference. They haven't got time to watch Pacific versus Long Beach State. And where in the past they would have like actually put eyes on it. They would travel to some of these games, even if you can believe it,
Supposed to
and
go
watch
everywhere.
the
You're supposed to
teams.
go to the conferences you monitor in person.
Yep.
Exactly. Or at least
Yep.
watch them on ESPN Plus. And I just think these folks don't have the time. And so, but they're still committed to doing this as best they can. And so they're leaning on the metrics. And if they want to lean on the metrics, that I mean, I note I'm a fan of college hockey, a sport that exclusively uses a metric to select the entire field, which
That's
is
crazy.
you can make a very good argument that's what they should do. But
We're
since
pretty
that
much
isn't
there
what they're
now.
doing,
Yeah.
they should not be doing it. Like
Well,
if
what they
this
should
is
really be doing, though, Zach, is just assign the entire selection committee to Hoops HD. That
Yeah.
would
yeah, we
solve
That's
the
should
entire
right.
problem.
well
We
then
would
Yes.
we
we
then
would
we could
not get it wrong. We would
We
not get it
we would
wrong.
not get it wrong.
We might piss off a couple big brands, but I think we would be very popular with the
we
fans.
don't tell you
Yeah.
what you want to hear. We tell you what you need to hear.
Right.
Exactly.
That's
Okay.
right.
I
I
agree
offer
with
this up every year. To David Warlock. We will take over this process. Just
you.
us.
I just want the ice cream Sunday
Yeah,
bus.
the ice cream.
To Rocco's earlier point, and I feel like this has accidentally become a podcast hammering Boise State a program I love and respect what they've
I
done,
do
but
too. I
they
like
stepped
Leon
on the
Rice.
rake,
Yeah.
so here we are. Um,
Yeah, I wish it happened to somebody else. I agree.
I I agree with Rocco's point that like it's very for a lot of reasons, including if they lost to Hawaii Pacific, there's a very good argument they aren't going to be near the bubble because they were capable of losing to Hawaii Pacific. It's very unlikely that this will actually like be a differentiator in terms of them getting it or not. But my because they're using the net to and because that data isn't in there at all, and that would sprinkle down to all the teams they play. It's just like the concentric circles that don't get affected. USC doesn't get affected by it. All the other Mountain West teams they play don't get affected by it. That's who it's impacting, even if it's not impacting Boise State.
Yeah.
I think on
That's
that
true.
note, we're just about out of time. So what I want to do is, though, is run through each of you for any other final thoughts you have on anything we've discussed today or anything else like that. And Rocco, why don't I start off with you?
Yeah, no, this was a great conversation. Chad, thanks for organizing it and happy to be a part of it. I think, the last thought is just to, kind of a finish it off where we just left off. And that is, I think there's part of what Zach was saying about the fundraising also is, how important these games are for the people and the sponsors that be with the actual March Madness, the title sponsors, the networks. And you can reverse engineer some of the stuff we saw in 2025, which was glaringly had some differences from even 2024 and before, to kind of reverse engineer that and find out that, obviously North Carolina and Texas, you could pick apart, tell we're blue in the face. I'll probably pick apart Texas on every one of our shows this year. But
Yeah.
my point is by putting big brands and putting having a ratings component to these first four games on Tuesdays and Wednesday, it actually starts to make sense that there might be more influence than ever if it's if the team's close enough to being in, let's just go with the bigger brand. That's kind of just the rub I get. Obviously, there's never in a million years that will ever be admitted. But I mean, I don't know what else to say except for it does align with following the money in terms of trying to put the best television product on. We also had a situation last year where Arkansas played Kansas in the first round, but if you actually redid the seed list, we talked about this in March. There would have been no way for them to meet if they just assigned them regionally, and the fact that they played each other in the 2023 tournament, which was also supposed to be discouraged per the bracketing principles. So anyway, I actually have no problem with any of that. It's just tell us that, and then we'll
Yes.
get it right, and we'll just accept the sport for what it is. But it's just all the facade and stuff. I think that drives people like us crazy.
Right. Zach?
It would be nice if, in terms of the actual scheduling thing, and it's great that we're seeing major programs scheduling actual home and homes, more of them. I mean, it's a lot of it's just to straight get NIL money. So let's not pretend this is all just for the better interest of the sport. But it is nice that that's happening. But again, there's like 250, 300 schools that aren't in that realm, and many of them are struggling to get these games. And I think it would be nice if so many of these leagues work together on officiating consortiums where you have Power Four league, mid major league, low major league. They pull from the same officials pool and they try and develop. That's how they're trying to develop the next generation of officials because as officials age out, we need refs. Okay, so these leagues have worked together to try and create a deeper pool of officiating. It would be nice to see if they could possibly use that collaboration that they have on that incredibly important feature of every game, and if they could branch it out into scheduling agreements. I also think to kind of the last point that we had hit on, uh, the athletic directors who are on the selection committee it's an incredibly tough job,
And commissioners, yeah.
and the commissioners. But if you take a second to think about it, they're kind of the worst people to pick for it because they're extremely busy people. I will be the 5,000th person to say we need to start getting non just commissioners and athletic directors on the selection committee to provide a deeper perspective, but also people who have the time to properly do the job. I just don't think you can be a conference commissioner or an athletic director in 2025 and possibly do the job of a member of the men's or women's basketball selection committee the way it has been done for 30 years and was done well and I don't think that's fair to them to expect them to be able to do that. I just think it would also help in terms of the mid majors if we could bring in more former players, administrators, HoopsHD, Ken Pomeroy,
Yeah.
let Joe Lenardi in the room for once, Rocco. Just it would. I think a lot of this, to what Rocco alluded to, if you're going to change the principles, just can you tell us? And the problem is we have this locked box where it's just commissioners and it's just athletic directors. And I just don't think their current job allows them the time to do this properly. Let's just widen the field out for that job. And that will allow you to bring in people who have more time to do the job and will notice little things like, hey, how come every Conference USA team is playing three non-Division One games? Why is that happening? And things of that nature. So I wish they would broaden the selection committee because I think they'd get a better view of some of these scheduling components. I don't think a lot of these like Stu Jackson has got too much going on trying to save the West Coast Conference to be able to
Yeah.
pour his energy into also doing this. He's trying, but he's one man with 24 hours in a day. So
Yeah.
let's bring more people into the room who don't have these pressures on them.
Or have staffers be a part of the process.
Yeah.
Greg, do you want to fish this out?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time complaining about the hot garbage that is a lot of the games on week one. I did want to give a shout out. I don't know if they're watching or if they follow us or not. The Field of 68 guys put on a what I thought was a phenomenally successful event, the Field of 68 Marathon. And one of the things I loved about it was that it was organic. They didn't have like a big network or a big thing backing it up. It's just a bunch of guys that love the game and was able to pull off a successful event. And amidst all the hot garbage, gave us six really good games. That actually warms my heart. First, to see games like that in the first week when you have so much hot garbage, and secondly, that it was done the way that it was done. The games were on YouTube. They were free. They weren't part of some big network or big television production. So all in the midst of all my bitching and moaning, I need to give a shout out for somebody that's doing it right, and I hope that that trend continues. Secondly, not to
They're going to 24 hours next year, by the way. They're going to do the full
are they?
marathon.
I hope they're
Yes.
able to pull that
Early.
off. I hope they're able to pull that off.
Got to get Hawaii. Hawaii is the
Yeah,
key.
and
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys are watching or not, or if you guys even know who we are, but if you are watching, first of all,
Well,
thank
Rocco's
you. And
affiliated with them, so
oh yeah,
Yeah,
obviously,
I mean
okay.
Rocco.
That
Rocco's.
that's
Yeah.
impressive. Mad respect for that.
Yeah, I mean It was great until Rocco intentionally pulled the plug
Yeah,
during
you
the
told
Bradley and Bonaventure game and
We'll
Okay,
threw
work on that
Woj
next
out
year.
himself,
okay.
which
You
was
know what though? I knew that this was a success when the stream went down and everybody lost their minds on the
yeah,
YouTube chat. That's
it's
when I was
true.
like, drink this up. It's working.
Oh, I was furious. That was a
You're
sign it
actually
was
right.
great.
Yeah,
That's a heck
like
of a matchup too. I mean, it's a heck of a matchup for 10 a.m. Eastern time.
yeah.
You know,
Oh, it was awesome.
Yeah,
I
and this
loved it. It
two
was the
very good
best thing
teams.
about
Yeah.
the first day of the season.
well,
It
and
wasn't even close.
the smartest thing they did was they had Winthrop in the first game when it was across the street from Winthrop, so they had a great
Yeah,
crowd for the first game.
Yeah, it
yeah.
was a great crowd. And
Hmm.
everybody was excited to not have to go to work. I mean, how awesome
Yeah.
is that?
Like if I had a
On a
job, I would have
Monday.
been excited to not have to go to work. But the other thing, I just want first of all, I would love to not to reiterate as a final thoughts that I've already shared. I wish the committee would look at attempt to schedule instead of intent to schedule and start to look at a team like last year's or UC Irvine, perhaps this year's High Point, and say, well, if nobody wants to play them, then why should we penalize them when you know I would like to kind of see that as another point of emphasis. And another thing, just about the game, I mean, so much of it smells so bad. We talk about how it's about money and how it's about scheduling wins. Georgia just beat Maryland Eastern Shore 94 to 29 in front of a couple of hundred people. And I can't imagine this was a big, like, financial windfall for anyone. So would we
Uh,
really be losing out if we started to schedule a little bit better early in the year collectively?
well, hold on. That was the same Eastern Shore team that took Georgia Tech to overtime 2 nights before. So,
Yeah.
but on that note,
Yeah.
How bad is
Enjoying the
Georgia Tech?
Atlanta Athens area there in Eastern Shore.
I do want to take the chance here to thank everybody for joining us. We will be back next week, beginning with our regular schedule of Monday night Hoops HD reports and Wednesday night Under the Radars. But on behalf of Zach Singer, Rocco Miller from Rocketeer.org, David Griggs, I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you again real soon.